Hello and welcome to our podcast. I am Dr. Nelson Moses, a speech language clinician and educator. Higher ed especially, my colleague and co-host Kimberly Osam is continuing to catch up on personal and professional obligations after some significant time devoted to helping her son deal with the medical issue. If you check out our last podcast, you'll get most of that story. I'm on my own again, but I could not wait to introduce my guest, Casey Cruz, so I asked her to come in before she and her wonderful partner, Georgia, run off on another adventure. She's a former student of mine and definitely among the best students I have ever worked with. You will see why in a moment. The aim of this podcast is to promote knowledge and puzzlement about the two processes that are foundational to my profession, speech and language. These processes are, however, poorly understood. Believe it or not, this podcast is dedicated to advancing the recognition that the term language should be understood not as a thing in a grammar book that others have to teach us, but as an action to language or languaging, the processes that we humans have for coding, that is representing content of mind, our intents, ideas, and emotions expressed in real time, streams of consciousness. Verbal speech is the typical output of languaging, but there are many other forms of output when speech is not an option. And by speech, this time I meant verbal speech. But there are many other forms of output when verbal speech is not an option, or when one prefers to employ one or more other code, other means of expression, such as art, music, technology, literature, etc., etc., etc. We are also dedicated here to learning from people who receive our services and in diversifying the field's professional practitioners to reflect the diversity of languaging based on culture, linguistic, gender, and neurological factors, which is the norm for our species. Kimberly and I also wish to use this podcast to give voice to the young SLCs who are making real contributions to our profession. And toward that end, let me introduce Casey Cruz. I promise you, our viewers and listeners, that you are going to enjoy and be stimulated by the podcast episode. Okay, so hi everybody again. Welcome to today's session. I am very excited to have uh, my a person who was a student of mine at Long Island University and is presently making great contributions as a speech language clinician. When she was a student of mine, she was my favorite student, Casey Cruz. Hi, Casey. My favorite student primarily because she would sit in class and actually answer me back. So she'd comment on what I was saying, whether she agreed with me, but more importantly, or most importantly to me, when she did not agree or couldn't quite follow what the heck I was talking about. She was open enough and so much kind of in the moment and in the conversation to be conversational with me. And as far as I'm concerned, that is what learning is about. So just to say, I'm really happy to have her. And Casey, maybe you want to introduce yourself and give a little background.
Okay, so I'm Casey Cruz, and I'm very excited that it's been officially announced that I'm your favorite student that you've ever had in your entire life. I think that's what you just said.
Uh,
And did you ever experienced in all of your academic career and teaching career? That's what I heard. That's what I'm walking away with. I'm keeping
okay.
that one forever. It's my
Cool. Right.
claim.
Right. Wouldn't. Yeah.
So I'm Casey Cruz.
No.
I am a Latina, queer, neuro-spicy person. I graduated from LIU last year. And after taking about a decade off from higher education, and I am coming up on finishing my clinical fellowship soon. I work for New York City Public Schools. I work at two different District 75 schools. For anybody who doesn't know, District 75s are schools with specialized instruction, and vocational opportunities and behavioral supports for students with significant challenges. And it's usually a mix of different challenges and or disabilities that usually medical, cognitive, and other types of things in there. So I work at a vocational high school 3 days a week and an elementary school K through 2, 2 days a week with this population.
Very good. When did you, I forgot already, when you graduated and when you started working?
So I actually graduated a semester early. I graduated August of last year. Like I
Uh-huh.
finished my second externship and that was the final thing I needed. Got my diploma and then I started officially working at that same school as my final externship in September.
Uh-huh. So that's very good. Very interesting. Very cool.
Mm.
Exciting because it's getting started on new things is always exciting. We were having a conversation before then I said, hey, let's put this
Yes.
the on this podcast and I'll start recording, see how it goes. But I was making the comment that I had an insight uh, the other day that well, part of this is not an insight, how much I respect Casey and her significant other, Georgia. Uh, but I know Casey best again as a mind-blowingly creative individual, great student, but who lives her life and you live your life in an honest way. You are honest with your own self about who internally you really are. And I certainly get that vibe from Georgia. And I, what the insight was, it was that I had was if you're honest with yourself about who you are and live your life honestly and interact with others in an honest way uh, about yourself because you know yourself, then you can um, truly relate to the other person. And from their point of view, you have a basis for then perspective shifting and allowing the person who you are with and having a conversation with, or attempting to have a relationship with, or treating as an SLC, you can allow that person to express themselves to you, and you'll be open to understanding their points of view. And if everybody remembers, that's a very important point, especially in the field that we're in, SLC, speech language services, clinical services. That's what the C is about. As you know, I don't use the term pathology here. Uh, it's important for our field because in the intro, I indicated what are some of the reasons that we're doing this podcast, and we're also, by the way, and Kimberly and I are also working on a book for the same kinds of reasons. But one of the points we make here is that language is first of all the basis. Speech and language are the basis of our profession, and language, strangely enough, is very misunderstood or ill understood. And it really is about um, the expression, the coding or representation of content of mind. What's on the mind of the speaker or listener as someone else is speaking, but they're interpreting it in their own heads in terms of the person's ideation, intentionality, goals that that person has at any moment, and emotional state and emotions that the person is expressing. And and languaging is that in what I really understand as the real-time stream of consciousness that people have. And everybody has stuff going on in their heads. So in our field where our objective is to help people ultimately, whatever the issues are that are interfering with what's on in there, the, what they're trying to express, um, we're here to help individuals do just that, externalize what we know already is going on in their minds. So
Mm.
unless you know yourself and are honest in who you are and what the more honest, listen, it's taken me a very long time to figure myself out, I myself still working on it at my age. But still, the better I do that, the better I know myself, the more honest I can be with others, and the more I can allow others to express themselves and not be somehow threatened by it in any way, or be being so self-protective that I just can't hear it. So
Yeah, and
just to
when you
say
yeah.
that,
Yeah, when you said that before, I was like, exactly, amazing. And so much of my own journey is, and my continued journey, right? Because you said you're many years in. I think you're about, a few years older than me, maybe 5 or 6 years older
a
than me.
couple of years,
But there's never really a finishing,
6
right?
years, right?
Of of our own journey of being
No,
honest with ourselves and understanding when you talk about languaging, expressing that which is inside of us with an intent, with an honesty and a presence about ourselves, and then and in our own almost like a fingerprint, right? Like I think sometimes of like the way that we speak and the way we communicate when we're giving that to somebody else, right? And is that a communication? I mean, it is communication, it is languaging, but how much we really give of the truth of our message and who we are, I think totally sets the stage as a total influencing factor and contextual factor of whatever is going to come up the conversation. If we are not honest about who we are, and that takes then a commitment to learning more about who we are and learning how our brains work, learning the conditioning that has gone into our brains, right? What's acceptable? How is it acceptable to be? How is it acceptable to talk? How acceptable is it to express yourself? In what regard? What can you express? All of these are conditions in our societies and our families and our cultures. And when we can wade our way through to, I know who I am, I'm honest about who I am, and I've done the work to figure out who I am. And so that the values that I have individually as part of a culture and that I'm coming forth with my message, I know what I'm coming forward with. What I'm giving to you is something that is authentically me. And if I'm not hiding, right? If I'm not hiding that I have ADHD or that I have autism spectrum disorder or that I'm queer, if I'm not hiding those things, and hiding takes effort, it takes cognitive load, right? If I'm not hiding those things, the more I have is more mental and cognitive capacity to share my message and to share myself. And when I give that to you just raw and as it is, it gives you the dignity after some self dignity, right? For myself, it gives the other person the dignity of like, here I am. It's an unfiltered place, right? Or not even not unfiltered, we don't have to say, right? It is a place that I have reflected and I'm honest and I am comfortable and there's no extra things in here. This is the message. This is what I'm trying to share. It gives an honor and dignity to the other person to receive it and trust that person to receive it and to hold it and then respond in kind with themselves wholly completely. And I think then we can get into like, what's the message I'm really trying to send? Whether that is in an academic setting where I'm sitting in the front row and you're saying something and I just don't understand or I don't agree. And I could be honest with you of like, I don't get it. Or I'm confused on this part. Or I don't even know why I'm confused. Something's happening. I can't, can we not go forward until we walk this through step by step? to an emotional or an important conversation, interpersonal conversation with a loved one or a coworker or a friend, right? When we can just show up and give in an honest, reflexive place, I think that we are like that much closer to real essential languaging of respect, honesty, context, and the real, because can we ever really get what's inside somebody else? Can we ever really get it? I sometimes wonder if what I'm giving, I'm like, gosh, I don't know, as I'm giving the words out, it's never going to be 100% what's happening inside because you'll receive it. And through your lens and experience, you're going to interpret it. So if I show up honest and I trust you to be honest, if I show up authentic and I communicate authentically, the other person has that respect and dignity and they can do that too. And I think we're just a little bit closer to understanding each other as humans.
Which is necessary to do decent work in our field. Again,
Absolutely.
regardless of what the issue is that the individual presents with, asking us for help about, at the end of the day, they want to be able, the people that would see us, they might be uh, disfluent, stutterers, they might be somebody who's had a stroke, somebody who is quote unquote delayed in terms of language development or whatever.
Mm.
Whoever that person is, they're they're with us to express what is on their mind, and that's
Yes.
what languaging evolved for, really, is for expressing and reflecting. Because
But
the other thing that I always stress here is that the person we speak to most is, everybody knows this, our own selves.
right, right.
So just to say that,
Well, let me expand on that. You know, you're talking about when you talk
do it.
about being an SLC and depending on the context, when people are coming to you, they're coming to say, there's something, somebody told me I have this diagnosis, or I have noticed I can't communicate, whether that is through speech or it's language or it's something else. And I want you to help me because I have the right to get what's inside me out and shared, right? I have the right to express myself and to be heard, right? And to be understood.
It's
And
a
that's in
universal
many,
human right,
it's a
right there.
universal human right.
Right?
We agree on that. And while I'm working in a school district and, I'm working with teenagers, those teenagers are not going, hey, mom, dad, abuela, tia, whoever's raising them, please make sure you sign me up for speech language therapy with somebody at school because there's a lot I'd like to express and I'm struggling to express it, right? They don't do that, right? There's an IEP meeting and, there's, where all of the providers who have done their assessments and everything come together and they say, your child, if they do it in a really good way, it's not just deficit based, but they're saying, your child needs X, Y, and Z to be successful in the classroom. And that doesn't mean that the student is like all gung ho to be a part of speech or OT. So sometimes if you can approach I'm going to be honest and come where I am. I'm going to offer what I'm offering. I'm going to say where I'm short and I'm going to collaborate with this student. You almost need to be honest with who you are in your presentation. I think you have to be genuine in who you are for a student who almost has no interest and potentially possibly has embarrassment about having speech language services. You need their buy-in for them to understand on some level, on a trust, an intuition, an emotional, an intellectual level, to understand that I show up and I get picked up by Cruz because Cruz helps me to express myself, right? And that's it. That's in community school, in specialized schools, in District 75 schools. Students are not always bought in, right? They have a right. They don't have always the right to decide. It's like parents and everything. But as the provider, you have to show up in a way that says, this is where I am. This is truly how I am. This is what our goal is. Like, can you tell me, do you agree upon this too? And you have to gain an amount of trust, and you can only do that by being authentic and honest to get them to buy in, to be like, oh, this is maybe the key about how I can be and express myself. This can actually help me there.
Sounds, I agree with that.
Mm.
That's very,
And
yeah,
students will sense that. Kids will sense that before
yeah, absolutely.
any other adult, any coworker, any teacher, like the students will sense that.
Yeah, 100%. Kids know.
Hmm.
I guess we all do, but kids know when
Mm-hmm.
you're tuned into them, or if you're not,
Mm-hmm.
period. And again, it took me a while to figure all that out, but that's basic to our profession. I just want to move on a little bit into the again, I mentioned languaging as one, and really we're pushing that here, trying to
Mm-hmm.
get that to be the accepted point, the accepted idea of what is foundational to our field. So languaging again is all about expressing what's on one's mind, but languaging the is the coding of it or representing of it in some way, because that's what we have to do, somehow represent it both to ourselves. Well, that's what it is all about, because it's what's in our head is what the world is to us, so to speak. There are multiple ways that what's in our minds can be represented. The most typical way when we language, when people language typical in the sense of frequent is verbal speech, but there are all kinds of ways that we can and do represent what's in our minds, our headset, and tell our stories. One of the part of the title here is things that we need to know, things we're puzzled about, i.e., language itself,
Uh-huh.
things we know, and stories that need to be told, because we're all about storytelling. We really create our world in a way by the stories we hear and, we tell basically ourselves. Well, in any event, the code can be then all kinds of different things. It could be verbal, but it could be technological, a device of
Mm-hmm.
one sort or another. It could be signs, physical gestures. It could be art. It could be music.
Mm-hmm.
It could be, literature. It's all kinds of possible things the human can use, we can use to code or represent what our ideation, our intents, and our emotions. So, uh, as it turns out, Casey here is, in addition to a speech language verbal type person, is an
Mm-hmm.
artist.
Yeah.
And I did, and Casey did a presentation on languaging through art at NYU. And I was very jealous of it because I wanted it to be first either on my thing, because it was an online thing too. And I've taught at NYU, but I'm more associated with Long Island University, Brooklyn campus. But here, Casey, actually, I just want to show everybody a piece of Casey's artwork that I did want to discuss a little bit. First, I did want to show the person. See, and she did that for me. We had a gathering here in my place, and this is what she gifted me. It's a tremendous honor to have this piece, and it's gorgeous. I love it. And this is the outside part. This there's a child, there are kids here, and this art piece of art was made with me in mind, which really, again, is very moving. Bronx, BX stands for Bronx, and as I may have mentioned here before, do some work and just like to hang out at University Heights High School in the Bronx. Bronx is probably my favorite place to be. Uh, in any event, the I did tell Casey prior to her coming on that I wanted her to talk about her art. By the way, George's and hers apartment is a mind blower. It's close to a museum or something like that, or yeah, a museum with it's just artwork everywhere. of one sort or another. It's and very creative. It's a wonderful place to be. I had
Yeah.
also great pleasure to have visited them
Mm.
there. They invited me, and I really appreciate it. And at NYU's presentation and in discussing the artwork, Casey made the mind-blowingly cool point that she described how she learned to honor imperfection. So I do ask you, and by the way, that seemed to me to very so much align, not with the term imperfection itself, which suggests something's wrong, but rather diversity, which is another thing we are very much presenting, very, very much bottom line reason for this podcast is first to honor diversity and recognize it in the field of speech and language, where people speak multi kinds of languaging, multi kinds of languages. Everyone trans languages. There's lots of mixtures going on. Uh, People are diverse. Diversity in all kinds of ways. So this field has to be about that, and the transformation from the past in this field, where any any sense of diversity was pretty much erased and wiped out because there was considered one professional way of speaking in the United States of America, the English, pretty much a Midwestern version of it, as if, that was the be all and end all of the English language. People with accents weren't allowed. People of color were not necessarily, and cultures outside of the
Mainstream white, like
Anglo-American,
Caucasian,
yeah,
Anglo-American for sure. Yeah.
Anglo-American
And of a certain
cultures.
class, don't leave class out of it. It's also
Yeah,
like Anglo-American
yeah,
middle to upper middle class,
yeah.
right? To
That
upper
whole
class.
scene. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the way it was.
Yeah.
And there's been a gradual transformation, but we need a push more.
Yes.
So we're here to push. And
Yes.
so I don't, but I am asking Casey to talk about some of the points you made over there at NYU, particularly on this imperfection thing.
Yes, so I'm somebody who didn't come to art until much later in life. I just never considered myself an artist. I never tried it. My brother was very artistic. He was very musical. I was, athletic, smart, and I saw these are the things I run with, and he's going to go in his realm. And I thought that was it. And then, you mentioned our home. We'll do a tour around our home in another episode. It's
Yeah, yeah.
floor to ceiling
Oh, you're
art,
there.
and it's not just wall art, right? We have antiques, we have art that stands like you just showed, like the
Yeah.
vase that I gave you with the decoupage over it. There's art everywhere, right? Because there's this importance. I didn't come to learn this importance until later. I used to be somebody who lived in a home with white walls and maybe a few plants that I wasn't in charge of, otherwise I'd kill them. And like things like beauty to me were not very important. And it wasn't until within the past couple of years and upon meeting my partner, she had so much art in her home, but they're all expressions, right? They're all expressions of different parts of ourselves, not even just maybe parts of our histories, different things and values and just ideas and delicious parts of ourselves that we love or we don't love or that we've experienced. And like there's such expression in art. I realized art is beautiful, yes, and beauty carries with it such complexities of expression and understanding. And so when I realized, I'm like, okay, it's beautiful. Can I do art? I don't know about that. I learned a little bit about decoupage, which, if anybody doesn't know, the simplest way to put it is you take an image that is on paper of some kind and you glue it, and seal it with a layer of something onto something else. So that could be a table, it could be a vase, it could be almost anything. And I took this as a little cheat code for myself. I said I could be an artist without having any artistic ability. I just take beautiful things and I stick them on things that could be more beautiful. And as I started doing this and learning technique, and I make such mistakes, and I'd be like, it's ruined. I can't do it. Like, there's a mess up. And my partner, Georgia, who you brought up, would come and she'd be like, no, 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 let me show you. I'm going to show you a trick. Right. And she'd find a way to like either obscure the error or make it seem like this was initially the intent. Right. We even like we were building things together, and I found myself getting so wound up about it's not perfect, it's not what it's supposed to be. But people look at it, and she used to say this thing. She'd be like, "It's homemade," and that to me would bother me. I'm like, so we're just going to acknowledge it's going to be ugly, right? And then all of a sudden, getting into it and realizing what we put into it is a story, right? So when I make something at home, I'm creating something that's not just the image and the beauty, but it's a story of when it happened and the feelings, and it carries everything in it. And I got a little less hooked and a little less hooked on like when I do art, my sneaky version of doing art, which I really only recently came to call doing art. I just would say I was cheating the system and not doing art before. Like there is no such thing as perfect. I want to honor imperfections because there is no such thing as perfection. There just isn't. We strive for it, and that causes a lot of pain and miscommunication and all of these things. And so in honoring imperfections in our talk, right? If I write a book, I'm going to send it to an editor. The editor is going to make the writing as perfect as they think, that publishing company thinks, and they've kind of got your message and they put it forward in a certain type of way. But when you and I are talking, I'm going to start and stop, and you're going to start and stop. In the middle of my sentence, I'm going to change directions. I'm going to switch up the syntax and be like, I started on one, and then I'm like, in the middle of sharing this, what I started with is actually not cohesive with the next thought that's coming. So I'm either just going to go into it and let it not be perfect syntax, or I'm going to go, let me start over. And it won't be perfect, but it's in this that like we're creating together. Not only are we expressing, but the stop, create the stop. This is our interaction, right? This is our relationship now, right? And then we know that like, when we're expressing things on our mind, they're not perfect. They're not. And so when we speak, it doesn't have to be perfect. There's no one person who has this perfect idea, not even like the right answers. If I approach a difficult topic with a friend or a partner, and I'm like, oh, I haven't figured out how to say this next part. I have this idea in my head, right? I haven't figured out how to say. So we have a code word for those who are closest,
Turn off the
right?
flower lights.
Turn off the flower lights. Um,
Elsa, here's your
Sorry,
reminder.
I have. Oh, look at it switching too. Yeah,
yeah.
Alexa reminds me of all kinds of things. I forgot to tell.
Oh,
I don't know.
Alexa,
I even have
yeah.
it turn it off because it's pre-programmed to remind me
Oh,
that
yeah.
because I burn everything and forget
Mhm.
everything. Sorry
But
about that.
yeah, but sometimes when we're expressing things like if I'm going to go on to something vulnerable, for example, I'm going to share something with a friend or a colleague or a partner or something like this that is vulnerable, or I haven't figured out ahead of time how to say this in a beautiful way, an acceptable way, right? I'm like, oh, I have a feeling I'm going to go on to some territory, something that my friends and I use, the people closest to us. I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to say something. I'm going to say it messy, and then I'm going to clean it up, right? And we both acknowledge, yes, no judgment. So whatever I'm about to say, we have this relationship, and I have that phrase where they go, great. If they go, great, you're going to be messy, then you'll clean it up. That's something we have agreed upon ourselves that they're going to say. You're going to say something. I'm not going to judge how it comes out. It may come out like syntactically strange. It may come out not quote unquote PC. It may come out like, but once you blurt it out and all of those words and all these things are out there, then we can clean it up and shape it together to like, yes. And it's almost a co-creation then. You and I, like, okay, here, I've just dumped all the words and some of the thoughts, but you trust me, you trust my attention, you know all the things, yes, and this is what I meant. Oh, yes. And then we kind of co-create, yes, and I confirm that's what I'm trying to say. Oh, no, 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 but this, yes, like that. Right. And so we are not perfect, but in acknowledging imperfection, because that happens all the time when we speak, is we don't speak like we write, right? I think it almost invites this co-creation to kind of like help each other sometimes, or this just ability to then move forward and be like, I'm gonna be me, not gonna be great. But maybe this is also in languaging, right? Is not just expressing one's, ideation and intents and emotions, but it's also understanding our own worlds with the act of languaging. I may not understand everything yet, but as I'm languaging with you, you're helping me to reach an understanding, right? With this back and forth, with this dialogue.
As long as we recognize we're both trying to figure it out,
Yeah.
literally, always.
But I mean, it's like that. I mean, how many times in class have I asked to you, besides our dialogues back and forth, where sometimes I don't understand something, right? Professor goes blah 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 blah. All this genius comes out, and the slides are blah, blah, and then I'm like, I'm like, I know it's supposed to be clicking for me right now. There is something that's not clicking. I don't know what it is yet, right? I don't know if that's my brain. I don't know if it's a general experience. Sometimes I'm like, there is something I don't understand. I don't know what it is. So I'll tell the professor. I'll be like, all right, Moses, I have a question. I don't know what the question is. I'm gonna start saying things, and maybe you can help me figure out this question, right? And that's how I operate because I'm like, listen, I know how my brain works. My brain is moving 100 miles an hour, and it's also processing a little bit latently, right? It's a little bit processing differently, I will say, as somebody who's neuro-spicy. And so I'm like, if I own that, because I really truly want to understand what's being presented, if I own all the things about how my brain works and how I assume your brain works for the quote unquote neurotypical or the person in front of me, I'm not an expert on you, but I know, I don't know it yet, but there's a question in here. If I know me and I'm honest about me and I give it to you, you're going to help me to understand. I literally co-create my questions with, or had co-created my questions with professors in class to get to my understanding. And it had to come with me being comfortable enough to say, I don't know what this question is, but there's something that's got me a little glitchy. And I think probably most of my professors at LIU have been wonderful in being like receiving that and being like, okay, I think I know where you're confused, right? And moving from there.
That's why you're one of my favorite students, if not my absolute favorite.
I think you
But
said favorite of all
yeah, I know,
time.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I did want to just take off for what you're saying. You did a good segue into the value of being diagnosed, actually, or assessment, because did want you to speak about that because you have two diagnoses these days.
Yeah.
I do know I've some of the story of your history. So maybe
Mhm.
you could talk about that for a few minutes. The value of diagnosis, interestingly enough, um, which it's in context of, we're dealing with, we're promoting here again the languaging thing and also presuming competence. So
Yes.
that's another reason for this podcast. And we have people who come to seek our service here to express themselves one way or another. And presumed competence is that everyone's language. From my angle on presumed competence, is just everyone's languaging. And so let's figure it out. And I give that respect to every individual I see,
Hmm.
and make the effort to figure it out.
Yeah.
But then one might say, well, then how could you be, so you've been labeled ADHD, you've been labeled on the spectrum, I think.
Yeah.
So go ahead. What do you have to say about that?
Okay. Yeah. I think this is a really interesting topic because, um, right. If we presume competence and like, well, we may be expert in our own experience, and because of our studies, our academics, we are, quote unquote experts. I'm going to leave that to be digested by other people, quote unquote experts of speech and language, right, and swallowing. But the person who's going to be sitting in front of us or through a screen or in the group, they're an expert too of their own experience and their own X, Y, and Z, and that kind of presumed competence. And if it's well, if everybody's an expert, then does anybody really need help? How everybody communicates is valid. Everybody thinks is valid. So can any diagnosis be valid? I'm throwing this all out there because I remember going to a panel at LIU, and after when it was for individuals who stutter, for stutterers. And afterwards, one of the professors being like, I've been doing this for years, and it's always this question of like sometimes like we just give people time to speak and we don't judge them for it. So do they really need speech, and like what's really our role? And I was just looking, at this professor who I respect so much, and I was like, you're kidding me, right? Because it's of course there's still value in us. and not helping somebody's language be more perfect, right? And or be better in some respect, but helping them to language in a way that can be accessible for other people, right? Because we can't deny the realities that we live in a world with different groups have different privileges, right? Depending on their abilities and the way they talk and the way they present. All this to say, I do value diagnoses, though they are not the end all be all. And you don't necessarily have to have any diagnosis to understand that, oh, I work a little differently. I grew up always like, oh, like this one is like a very smart child, just like lazy. I'm sure people who are listening who have ADHD or ADD diagnoses probably relate. And I had this like always sense of shame of like, dang, like, okay, I'm smart, but I really don't think I'm ever going to necessarily amount to anything, right? Like if I don't do anything, it's just my fault. I'm smart. I'm just deciding not to do anything with it. But I didn't get a diagnosis of ADHD until about 24. So every time I was like, oh, like this one's so smart, so smart, so smart, but then I couldn't do anything about it. It just created this like cycle of shame that I have because I didn't understand that what I had was a difference in the brain, my way it operates and the way that my brain operates. And that ADHD is more than just inattention, right? It's pervasive. It's part of your brain. Our brain is kind of doing everything, right? So it's like so much of like what was limiting me and what I didn't understand. And when I got the diagnosis at 24 and I told my parents about it of ADHD, they were like, oh yeah, well, we figured you were ADHD. And this blew my mind. I was like, what do you mean? And they're like, oh yeah, we just figured. I said, well, why didn't you ever like get me like tested, like get some support? Like all my grades were C's, but all my exams were like high 90s or hundreds, right? And they were like, well, you're smart. And I was like, I've got this shame complex that I'm still working to decondition and to get rid of, right? And I'm going through my life being like, now, all right, I'm 24, I'm 25, I'm 26, I'm 27. I've got ADHD. I'm learning about how my brain works. I'm trying to be a little bit better, trying to take the shame away, but I'm still talking to other people who say they have ADHD. And I'm like, damn, like ADHD is like, I guess, pretty different from like every person to another because that's not my experience. And I kept running into issues a lot. Um, when I was in my undergrad, over a decade ago at this point, I had some classmates who were always quote unquote translating for me. They were translating for, I used to have this, I guess, resting bitch face. My tone, people thought like I was combative. People were a little bit scared, like, don't get Casey angry. But like, I was not really often that angry. And like, I would say something and I have friends come and be like, okay, great. So like, she's not angry. This is what she means. She's a little confused. And it's actually through their mediating or translating because they knew me well enough. They're translating me to other people that I actually, in time, developed my own self-advocacy skills because I'd have these conflicts at work, arguments where I was like, I didn't even know we were in an argument. I got written up for an argument. Were we arguing? Or like, something's laid out. We're doing this new thing. And I have some questions for clarity because I'm here to be the best that I could be. The questions that the things and the interactions I had kept leading to the same type of conflict and this questioning that like, I'm questioning authority, I'm pushing back, and these things that none of them were any of my intention, right? I talk about ideation and intention. My intention was to receive clarity on things I didn't understand that for some reason everybody else was understanding. Or I'm like, I 100% get everything you're saying, and I'm moving along with it, and all of a sudden there I get a pulled aside by a boss who's like, you're doing X. And I'm like, well, it's because you said to do X. And they're like, yeah, but when people say X, they mean X, A, B, C, D. And we don't actually mean X. You have to kind of disguise it as a Y. You understand? And I didn't understand. Kept getting in conflicts, kept doing whatever. And then one day I'm sitting down with Georgia, talking about a recent thing at work where I'm like, I'm trying to do my best, teach these kids this, show up this way, make sure I understand everything. And now, I'm getting written up. I really don't understand what's going on. And Georgia's nodding at me. Georgia, by the way, has been a special educator for almost 20 years now, I think, has really done a lot of work. And I'm going to let her toot her own horn because she gets a little bit bashful when I toot her horn. But she's done a lot of work working with students with IEPs in specialized schools. So like I think of New York City's like top schools like Townsend Harris, for example. And she's not working with twice exceptional students. She's working with in a community school with gen ed kids, but then also working with students with IEPs who were like placed in this school. And Georgia said, if you have the right accommodations, anybody can succeed here. And she showed that and she did that kind of thing. But she was used to working with a lot of kids and students with autism, with ADHD, with other things going on. So I come home telling her about ta 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 ta. Why is so and so so annoyed with me when I just want to make sure I'm his best worker? And she looks at me and she goes, well, a lot of people with autism, blah, 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 blah. And I looked at her, I'm nodding my head, and I'm like, that's fascinating. That's fascinating. Thank you for sharing that fact about people with autism. Now, as I was saying about my story, and she's like, well, you have autism, you're autistic. And I was like, where'd you get that from? And she's like, you say all the time you're neurodivergent. I'm like, yeah, I have ADHD. That's neurodivergent, right? And she's like, you're not just ADHD. And then she proceeded it. It felt like an intervention. I felt shooketh, right? Where she's telling me, she's outlining like how autism level 1 presents, right? Especially in like very intelligent individuals, like bop, 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 run into this problem, bop, 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 run. And she's naming these things and relating them to me. And this person who I trust more than anybody in the world, and I know loves me and I love her so much. I look at her and I'm like, that's not true. And I'll prove you wrong. And I spent $3,500 on an assessment to prove her wrong. I said, I'm gonna spend it. Show you I don't have autism. And a test came back. They said, you have ADHD. You have whatever the IQ is. She's always like, what an IQ? I'm like, I don't even remember the number. So what does the IQ matter if I can't remember my IQ number? Right? Like, and then it said I got the TISM, right? It said you on the autism spectrum, you are autistic. And this initially was devastating. It was actually really devastating. And it was frustrating because these things are not understood in women or AFAB individuals. And I just looked back on like the past 20 years of my life that I had struggled in connecting and relating and in my language and in presenting my thoughts and understanding what people even wanted or were trying to say to me. And how could I even be fully who I was? How could I language authentically without understanding that my brain is working differently and there's enough science to understand how it's starting to work different, like how it works differently. So once I kind of got over the like, oh my God hump, and I still like grapple back and forth between like, maybe I am, maybe I'm not. But I think the most important takeaway is that with the diagnosis of ADHD and with the diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder, I have been able to reframe a lot of my experience and understand that there was not a deficit in me, or there was not a laziness gene in me, or an incompetence gene in me, or just an error or a glitch. Like, oh, this works different. And once I can understand that, and that label is language, right? And when we language, we are understanding, even shaping our own knowledge based on the language and understandings that we already have. And all of a sudden now my experience is taking a different form. And now there's less shame I put aside myself. And now I self-advocate in the beginning of it. Anytime I had a new professor, like tell me if I'm wrong. Moses, one of the first things I said in class is, I'm gonna ask a lot of questions. Sometimes when I'm confused or I'm asking questions, my affect drops, or it looks or sounds like I'm angry, but I promise I'm not angry. I said that to every single professor I had at LIU when we first met to make that abundantly clear. And I think some got it and they really took it, and some got it. And then when it happened, it was a little jarring. And then they like, oh yeah, like this is what Casey was talking about. And I check in with them later, like this is okay. Like I even at LIU, I went to their counseling services for some communication support. I was like, I don't know what to do. Like there was this professor who got like really upset when I didn't understand something. And I was asking a question like 7 different ways because they weren't answering the thing I had. I was even struggling to language out the confusion and what they were saying in 7 different ways. I was like, we're not getting each other. And she helped me come up with a strategy. She's like, you may have some processing time. You may need to ask. She's like, permit yourself to ask 2 or 3 ways, maybe just 2. And then after the second wave, they still don't answer your question, say, okay, thank you so much. I might connect with you after class about this. And she was like, that might give you some processing time for you to process your question or to get some clarity as the lesson moves on, because I do. stop a lesson in its tracks until I understand, right? She's like, and that way the professor came up, you can move on. And then later, after some processing time, you can actually get the question or realize that you had the understanding or answer or reframe it in a way that's more understandable. So the diagnoses, they're not the end of the world, they're not the beginning of the world. They don't change who you are, but I think that if you have the access to get one, if that's something you want, that's something you're searching for, it gives you a frame of reference, gives you a framework to understand even yourself and operate honestly, operate authentically, and operate with I've been able to operate with my brain more than against my brain. And that has, I think, freed up the cognitive load, right? Freed up the ability of myself to just be myself and to receive as much as I can and engage and express myself as well as I can.
So you're ultimately saying there is value in,
Yes,
essentially, for
yes.
you, there was value in
For me, there's value, and
identifying.
yeah, and but that's also to say that, for example, like getting a diagnosis after you're, an adult is a lot harder. Getting a diagnosis that's correct, it means that you have to find a provider who understands, depending on who you are. For example, AFAB, right? Like I'm a woman. I'm very intelligent. There doesn't seem to be any intellectual disability, other things going on. You have to have somebody who has the expertise and nuance in certain things, right? And then you also have to have insurance, right? Then you have to, if you're going to be if you suspect you're level one autistic, right? Then you have to have money to do it. You have to have the insurance to do it. And you have to have a provider with the expertise in level one autism to be able to diagnose this. But, most people who are level one, let me take away most. I won't say anything without everything to go by. When I talk to other people, who are neuro-spicy, I like to put it, like a lot of times we've already done our own research. I probably did about 8 like assessments online, like screeners for to see. And I kept getting higher and higher scores, which means I win, right? But they were like, no, like you're probably autistic, go to a psychiatrist. So I ended up going and get a full, neuropsych to get that done. But not everybody has the time, the ability to do that. So if you suspect and you're going along these things, okay, maybe you don't have the money to go and get a diagnosis, but if you suspect and you understand the framework then, and you start to operate and try to work with your brain and adjust differently, that is a huge help. Now, autism that doesn't mean necessarily that everybody I speak to has to know I'm autistic or that um, that my experience is more valid because I have that diagnosis, but that I would not have trusted myself. I would not have trusted other people who have decades of experience working with, population that I have many similarities to until I had somebody sit in front of me and do this battery of assessments, da 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 da. I needed it for me. I ran myself over 3 grand deep to prove somebody wrong, and I just proved myself wrong. But it's helped me in the long run.
Uh, just a couple of comments on the neurodiverse, neurodivergent, neuro-spicy. I like that term.
Mhm.
Uh, thing, and just I've made the point, I think, over some time now that, first of all, neurodiverse, one of the concerns I think you may also have had, or people who are, when you think about getting a label, is that typical doesn't accommodate to diversity, neurological diversity necessarily, and other all kinds of forms of diversity. But that, my position is ultimately it's coming into into vogue these days that everyone neurodiversity should apply to everybody. It applies to everybody,
Right.
because we're not we are diverse. Each of individual is influenced by the culture, family, and all that, which allows for both community and similarity as well as difference, but also the my focus has always been the internal stuff. There's stuff that makes us individuals,
Mm.
and that's just as important as the stuff that makes us community, culture, etc.
But that's the good stuff,
Because
right?
because it allows us to select and choose to change, to be ourselves, etc., which doesn't have to be our parents or our who are, with the teachers who tell us we have to do speech and language. This, if I paid too much attention to that, which I,
Right.
no comment. And if people pay too much attention to me, no comment. So there's neurodiverse, that should apply to everybody. Because, by the way, if there's a term that goes right back to the idea that there's typical and then there's disabled. Well, you're going to take away, or disordered. Well, you're going to take away the term disordered and use now the term neurodiverse to work. Another purpose of this podcast is to
Mhm.
obliterate dichotomous thinking, right and
Mhm.
wrong, good and bad, and stuff like
Mhm.
that. This kind of
Yeah.
categorization, and then give it an equality. So
Well,
there's
I
that
think
thing now. Neurodivergent is being that distinction is now being made, and that applies to a neurological condition that somebody may want to treat or something like that. I don't know, but
right.
just
Well,
to say,
there's also like, you know, I think I want to say the name right, Devon Price or Devon Price, who wrote the book um Unmasking Autism.
yeah,
Like that PhD went into it and goes into it's really a book for anybody to read, but especially if you're like level 1 or level 2 autism, it might be a great book to read. But Devin Price wrote in the book that like, some people take issue. Everybody's getting more and more autism diagnoses these days. Like, what if people just act a little different? Does that just mean that they're autistic? Like, what does it just mean they're just a little different? Is that when before the beginning of this show, we talked about class being an issue, right? You have to talk in the way that a certain class and a certain race and a certain color that all these people talk, and that therefore makes you acceptable, hireable, respectable. We can validate the things that you're saying. But what we're saying is that if everybody's working to present and communicate in this way that we've kind of put up as like, the standard American English, like the valuable language that we must speak, then everybody's altering themselves or masking to some extent, whether or not you have autism or ADHD or bipolar or something else or OCD or something like this, like, or, it's a touch. All these things are a spectrum and like everybody's autistic. Whatever the fact is, can we acknowledge that brains are working differently and our society honors and rewards our capitalistic hellscape society rewards, right, a certain way of communicating, of expressing to be able to enter a certain job force or to be a certain level of productive and respectable to work, when we should say we're all human beings. We have the human right to be able to communicate for ourselves. And some of us have to communicate in a different way because of physiologic reasons, right? Or neurogenic reasons, makes it no less valid, right? So like when you say everybody's neurodivergent, I'm not even here to argue with it. I would say we are neurodiverse, right?
yeah,
Many are neurodivergent. And what I'd like to step away from, and I think what you argue for, is like authentic languaging and not
yeah,
necessarily this
yeah,
push
yeah.
to speak a
Everybody,
certain way,
yeah,
right?
and
Exactly.
both language and cognition as well. The world you live in, I typically do not feel sorry for people who come in with different conditions and this and that and the other thing,
Hmm.
including people who are, significantly delayed, because each of us, who's to say that that world is any worse or any better than my world, or my
Hello.
world, I could be, as bright as it can be, I can be, and a male, and
Hmm.
whatever the thing is that makes you,
Hmm.
helps you out in this society. Who's the hell's,
Hmm.
who's to say,
Right.
I've got a better life, I'm happier. It's craziness. It's all craziness,
Yeah.
so that people construct their world and should be able to be supported in being cool with it. And then, of course, we negotiate with one another so that we got overlap, and then there's mobility. But
Mm.
just to say, it's very, very
Right. Well, I mean, even what you
whatever.
just
I
said,
don't know what to
like,
say next,
like, if,
but that's
well,
it.
maybe whatever. But what you were saying just resonated with me. It made me really think about the concept of like this dignity, of being allowed to make a mistake, for example, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So you acknowledge, you're a white man, you're highly educated, you have all these things, right? I have a lot of privilege in a certain way, whether or not, everyone wants to acknowledge they have a certain amount of privilege. The people come into our office, right? Let's say it's somebody with Down syndrome, or it's somebody with cerebral palsy who needs to use, for example, an AAC device, right? And we're going to work with them and working on speech and language, and they have their device and they make a error on their device, right? And we got to what, mark it. Oh, they made a mistake. Is anybody counting how many times like I've mispronounced a word, or how many times my syntax has been fucked up? No, because they're like, well, Casey has a master's, Casey's expert in this, Casey's da da da, Casey's all light skinned and everything, like da da blah blah blah, all these things. And like, all right, Casey's gonna make mistakes, and like humans make mistakes. So in talking, community is natural. But when we have somebody who comes in with a diagnosed disability, or a visible disability, or one that is just much more easy to quote unquote see, we don't really permit them to make as many mistakes without jumping into correct, right? When I'm like, we have you're afforded a certain amount of dignity in your communication, in your languaging and expression, whether that is verbal or nonverbal, as a person with a certain amount of privilege. And so do I, versus somebody who walks in and may look, quote unquote, disabled, when we can be disabling them by jumping every single thing. I'm gonna stay here with my little whiteboard or my little phone and like, hold on a second, all right? Just gonna mark that error. We're gonna work you to 100% no error, when who the hell is walking around in their
Right.
daily life with a no
And,
error?
yeah, with no error based on me and my decision of what an error is and
Right,
what isn't an error and
exactly.
stuff like that. And without any consideration to the system or systems that person is operating with and that works for them and that
Mm,
allows them to express themselves and
yeah.
et cetera, et cetera.
Mm,
Yeah, well, this is our field. This is what
yes.
we're pushing for. This is why I'm really
Mm.
thrilled that you spent time with us here.
I
We're
think,
about.
yeah, for me, a
Right.
diagnosis was liberating.
Yeah.
Not in the label itself, but in understanding myself. That
Yeah.
is what allowed me, when I entered grad school, at
Yeah.
the time that I did, at the place that I did, to be able to be like, okay, well, I was like at least 10 years older than most of my cohort. So a lot of times I was just like, I am who I am. I'm returning now ready, understanding how my brain works to receive an education. So when I'm sitting in front of a professor, a doctor, somebody who's not a doctor, but is as, 15, 20, 25 years in the field, right? And I do respect them, right? When I don't understand something, I'm going to say it because I'm there to learn. And I understand that maybe other people get it and I don't get it, and I'm not embarrassed about it anymore. My brain just works differently. So I'm going to ask the question, and I will halt the lesson. I don't mean to, but I want to figure it out.
I
That
would
has
just
what
say
has
that
been
I wish
liberating.
everybody would, because the idea that because you're neurologically different again,
Hmm.
everybody in the class, I know it. That's why
Hmm.
I'm such a, as you know, I'm so popular
Yeah.
there. Like I have to get people to say what they're thinking about the
Yep.
material, which may be diametrically opposed to what I'm trying to say or my thinking. Doesn't
Yes, but there's
matter.
this fear.
Doesn't damn matter because I'm not te there's no way anybody's just sitting there with a blank brain
Yeah.
absorbing my words of wisdom or whatever the hell it
Yeah.
is, or my notes, as much as they want the PPTs up,
Yeah.
PowerPoints up, taking notes, blah, blah, blah. Also, ordering things from
Yes.
YouTube or from uh, not Amazon. What's the other one? eBay. eBay's not so popular anymore, is it? I used
I
to
don't
be
know. They're on
a
all the
big
places.
eBay
No.
guy.
Yeah.
But just to say, just to say, unless I understand how people are thinking about the material I'm presenting or my words, it's not, how they're thinking about it. I'm not teaching because I'm just talking.
But I
And it
found
ain't the
this. I
same
found
thing.
no, I found a lot of students either fearful to ask a question because students will walk away not understanding, and they'd be like, I don't know, I'm gonna have to study this later. And all I think to
Yeah.
myself is like, you just had the expert in front of you. You had the opportunity to ask a question. And there is almost this,
And you're paying a lot of money for this.
yeah,
So
but
for God's
and
sakes, speak up.
right, there's almost this like they're the expert. I don't approach, I don't ask, or I just want to know what they want me to know, and I'm going to learn
Yeah.
that, and I'm going to
Yeah.
ace the
It
exam.
drives me
And
crazy though. What do
no,
you want me to? What do you want
yeah,
me to? That's the
yeah.
most thing that drives
And
me most
and I'm not sure.
crazy
I'm
as
not
an
always sure what
educator.
the root of that is. And again, I'm like maybe because I've tried to speculate about this. I'm like maybe it's because a lot of the graduate students they're in their early to mid 20s. I'm like maybe the confidence isn't there. There's a lot of deference to the experts, to authority, which to me doesn't mean you can't ask questions, but maybe to a lot of people means that you can't, and like I'm like maybe it's this, maybe it's that. I don't know, but I do know that when we have a client in front of us and we're trying to get them to learn a concept, we do not lecture at them, right? We need them to, we
Well,
get them
no,
to
that's
talk.
not necessarily true. People
Oh,
do. In
well,
fact, when I started out, I keep referring to myself as the worst of the worst when I started out, because all I
mhm,
was doing was giving exercises to
mhm,
kids,
mhm,
who were, very delayed one way
mhm.
or another. But they were kids to begin with.
Yeah.
We got
But he
delayed
was,
anything. They were
but that
kids
ties
with
right
their own
back
interests.
in.
I had no, paid no attention to that
But
whatsoever.
that goes
Speaking
back
of
right back
lecturing.
into what we were saying at the beginning, which was like I was saying with students and kids, they're not the ones who signed up who thought to themselves, I'd really like to language better. And
Yeah.
I see that there's a barrier and I need to get over it. No, you got to buy in with kids, right? And a lecture doesn't buy in. And by the way, I'm always comforted when somebody like you and some of my mentors and my supervisors have talked about in their first couple of years just being the worst they ever been. I've been using that as like a safety blanket when I feel insecure about the work I'm doing with students. I'm like, I am only going to get better over time, right? But like, we want kids to talk. And and not even just kids, any of our clients, I am a bilingual speech language therapist, bilingual Spanish. And I joke around all the time. I'm like, I'm bilingual. I'm like 1.5 bilingual. I'm like 1.75 bilingual because I was not raised in a Spanish speaking household my whole life. I was raised in the first few years of life in a Spanish speaking household. I was adopted into a white family, only spoke English. And I learned Spanish later on in an interest to get to know my roots. That my Spanish is not always going to be perfect. And actually, when I was working with adults at LIU who were in Bolivia under my supervisor, Diana Sanchez, I did all my research and I know I'm not an expert yet, but I'm operating under the expertise of this. And I'm looking at this strategy and that's the strategy for, post CVA and like aphasia clients. And I'm like, all I could think of was I am not an expert yet, not in aphasia treatment, not in, languaging post stroke treatment. I'm learning, I'm applying. And also, I'm not an expert in Spanish. So, what did I do? I leveled with them very first day. I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to learn from you. At times, my Spanish is not going to be perfect. I hope that, you can count on me to be here to support you. And I hope you can support me too. And there were some times where I was like, either I really didn't understand something that they were saying, or I couldn't find a word, or I kind of was like, I don't know, I'm struggling to find a word. Maybe you can help me. When we take this like power dynamic of provider and client, I know all, and you're just here to be helped by me. And we take that back. We're two human beings. So we're here to facilitate something together, your own growth and what your objectives are, which I want to take the time to learn. We're not just doing exercises to no end, right? I had this guy who was an economist, had a stroke in his like late 30s, couldn't do it anymore, and started doing art. And I was like looking over the past work that he did, and I'm like, what am I gonna do with him? And I was like, pick up my strategy, but like, what does he want? This guy has a life that I can't even know about, experience I can't even, expertise I can't even know about. And also, what does he want out of this? And he had Broca's aphasia. It was very severe, and but we worked through it. I said, all right, I think I've got it. What do you want to work towards by the end of the semester? Do you want to teach LIU students how to do a mural on campus, graduate students? I wanted to honor him. I'm like, well, he is literally an expert in things I won't even be able to fathom. And right now he's an expert in art. He sells art in Bolivia, right? Like he doesn't have his spoken language is interrupted with Broca's and all these things. And so he has all his expertise in art, all his expertise in life before the stroke. And I'm like, do you want to teach graduate students? Because you have expertise to share. Or do you want to put on an online exhibition since you've already done in-person stuff all the time? And he was like, I want to put on an online exhibition of my art. And he did that. We worked the entire semester on language that was functional for him, for his art. He got to negotiate all the time about what words we were going to use, what language we were going to use. Was this an easy cadence, right? This sentence was too long and like blah, blah, blah. I also came up with this word, and maybe that's not used in Bolivia. Bolivia has, yes, it's a lot of Spanish speaking, but there's so many indigenous languages that also influence the Spanish that you're speaking. If you're not also speaking another language, it doesn't matter. It's all influenced. So I put it up a script. We did a lot of script training, actually based off a lot of what Dr. Gianna Giannakouris at LIU, I looked at her research and actually formulated what I was doing. But he could correct and change the script anytime to what was natural for him, what resonated most with him with the message that he wanted. At the end, we put together an online exhibition, a virtual tour. People saw his art on walls. They got to explore it. Then he did his presentation. And then he sold a piece of art for $400. This is what matters to him. He's an expert in art. He's already selling art in Bolivia. Can I help him? And what does he want to do? Start selling online? Great. I don't know how to do all that. I am not the expert. I'm not the expert in Spanish. I'm not the expert yet in aphasia. I'm not the expert in anything. But I'm here to collaborate with you and how we do this together. We have to honor who's with us. And I want to honor and be truthful about who I am. And that's the only way that we can collaborate and move forward to get the buy-in and the trust that I can actually, okay, what is it that you want to say? I'll take my time. You take your time too. I don't know what the point of that rant was, but I felt passionate about it.
Yes. That's why you're here. That's why you're my favorite student. In any event, thank you. I think we're going to come to a conclusion at this point. Are you cool with that?
I'm great.
We have more to say.
I'm great with it. And I just want to say, like, I appreciate you and I respect you so much. And the reason why I made that piece for you.
Yeah, it's great. It's very moving. It's very nice.
It was like you asked, I think earlier, like what I was trying to express with that, like maybe what I was trying to language with it.
Yeah.
But I think with art, and the reason why I got into art and the reason why I got into more owning art and saying I can be an artist, it's because I don't know how to language everything perfectly. I don't. And sometimes things that we're trying to express and inside, I think some of the most beautiful things are things that are difficult to have a perfect, beautiful, poignant message to. That piece of art I made for you, you see it has pieces that have to do with the frog story. It has to do with students. You see every student, every person you see in there is engaged.
Yeah, this whole
There's a little girl who's an astronaut because I think you see the kids for like where they're going to be, like where they're growing toward, right?
Right.
I think Malala is on there. You also see that there's some anatomy in there too. I always, because our brain is at work, but our society is also at work. Everything is also at work. So that piece is my connection to you, my appreciation for you.
Thank you so much. That's very
it's a reflection of what I've learned and my experience of my interactions with you, what I've gleaned and what I've earned. And I could write you an essay, maybe. I write you a letter. But how do I wrap that all up of how I have seen you, how I've experienced you, how I've been inspired of you, what I think I'm reflecting back into you? Like, do you see it? Like, here's a mirror, and it's not, right? You're not going to see your face in it, but this is a mirror. This is all the things that I have gleaned and gotten and grown from and have been inspired by with you. So that's what that art is for you.
Yeah, you're very kind.
Do you want to say hi to Dr. Moses? George is here if you want to say hi.
Georgia, everybody.
Come here. Come here for a second.
All right, come on.
Come here, you.
Hey, hi, yeah, hey, great to see you. Yeah, and
it's a pleasure to listen.
Your partner here, she's great, no?
There's the one who got, right, who was like, you're autistic.
I need to hear you talk about your career in special ed.
Yes.
I don't know if you do you work in District 75?
I never worked in District 75, no. But I always worked at
my history there. I was pre-District 75. It was called Track 4 back in the day, 1975 to 1978.
No, but I know it.
Yeah, that was pre-District 75.
You have to do a podcast. You have to interview Georgia because of her experience.
Yeah,
because I think it's so worth not only, but like we always talk about, speech and language for students with delays and disabilities who like have an intellectual disability, but like she's working because I think we need support and expertise and nuance throughout the spectrum from level 3 to level 2 to level 1 to intellectually to intellectual disability, but struggling and grappling with accessing things because of even their intelligence or their neurodivergent, their neurospiciness in that regard. She's an expert of being like, hey,
yeah.
anybody, not anybody, people can do this. You get creative with supports. You don't change the expectations. You get creative with supports. You actually understand disability and you understand where the deficits are and how we actually differentiate, how we actually help connect the dots for students and have them transfer that ability to them to self-advocate, to self-empower. She's the expert in doing that in the community setting.
I'm actually, I'm just excited to also talk about the history of things, because it's like I'm always trying to piece together where everything came from.
Yeah. By the way, I'm from Willowbrook State School.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I got a message that in one of the schools that I'm supporting this summer, there's a little boy who's terrorizing everyone. He's hitting, he's punching, he's doing all sorts of things.
Yeah.
And it was really funny because, I just asked a couple questions like, oh, like tell me a little bit about, oh, he doesn't speak English, he barely speaks, he's missing teeth.
This is the description. These are the salient points to share.
So I said, you know what? I'm so excited. I'm like, I'm gonna do 2 days. I'm gonna just.
Yeah, I know why he's flipping out. Just from that description,
right? Just from that description, you already know
where the kid's at.
I know. Oh, first of all, you want to know the cutest, most dimpliest, most adorable little boy was this boy. And when I asked him if there was, like he had a favorite song, and he sang me an entire song perfectly well, knowing all the lyrics.
Which, wait, could you communicate with him in English?
I know. Of course I could.
They said he doesn't speak English.
Also, people struggle to understand him, but also I don't think people are making an effort to understand because they're just assuming we don't understand. But what I wanted to bring up about this is I watched, because I sat there from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. with him 2 days in a row. I watched people teach a class, give instructions, tell people what to do, and just he had zero access, like he couldn't read it, he couldn't whatever, and nobody gave him any attention, nobody checked in on him, nothing at all. And they said, oh, you see, he cannot do math, and he cannot read, so we don't know what to do. And I was like, this is interesting. That's what you're saying. As you're having him read when he can't read English. So why don't we sit next to him and read it to him and work together and see what he knows? And at one point, they were like, they have to write down their favorite food. So I knew he couldn't really spell, but I made a whole list of like 10 foods. He can pick out where it said pizza, where it said Takis, where it said whatever. But like, nobody was making anything that was going to bridge the access gap. So then he just sits there and punches people, because what is he going to do?
So anyway, that story is.
They have behaviors there because I don't know.
No.
Because they're sitting in a classroom with students of varying levels and not being challenged, not being seen. Being seen. And I think when Georgia and I talked
they're not being seen thing. I mean,
do our kids, do we see them? Do you understand? Do you feel seen? And when you are seen, and how do you gauge that, is the scaffolding and the support and the challenges that we help put in place, or the things to help make them stronger. And anyway, you got to do one with her.
And they're doing things that are respected. So let's do one. Yeah. Okay.
I know. One last thing I'll say. When I was in my grad school program, I may have said this. There was some really good stuff. There was some wasteful stuff, a lot of wasteful stuff. But one of the classes, one day they handed out a reading selection to everyone in the class. And they said, finish the reading selection, answer 2 questions. And like, when you're ready, just look up. And I'm Greek. So I got a Greek reading selection, which I found curious. So I read it. I answered the questions. Everybody was doing their thing. Everybody was looking up. And there was maybe like 4 kids that were looking around, grad students that were looking around and looked very confused. And what the teacher had done is they gave out 5 Greek reading selections and the rest were in English, so that you can see what it feels like when you're reading. We can't read something, you can't answer it, but everyone around you is done and looking up and ready to go. And the teacher's like waiting for everyone to finish. And we were laughing because I was like, well, I knew the Greek, but those 4 people were discussing how uncomfortable it was to see. They were like, how did everybody read the Greek? But it wasn't. Most people had English. So anyway, it was just a reminder of, and yes, they're not going to speak up. They don't want to look like
everybody else is doing it, so why can't I? Yeah, they're not going to fess up to it.
It's a pleasure. More always.
Interview this one. She's got so much knowledge and experience.
Yeah. Okay.
For sure.
We will schedule that. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much. I really do.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
I mean, thank you, Casey Cruz and Gianna Giannakouris. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly. for joining me today. I am looking forward to a follow-up session with Kimberly, who has lots of comments and ideas for Casey and Georgia, and a standalone session with Georgia on her view of things as a special educator who collaborates with the speech language profession. Thanks, everybody, for looking in on this podcast. I invite you to take a look at Kimberly's last episode about challenges she experienced in a hospital setting while dealing with a swallowing issue that her son was experiencing. Also, check out our session with Alina Tretyak that I just posted. Alina is another relatively recent graduate who works as an SLC in a New York City high school. Alina is an SLC influencer on TikTok, as you'll see in the episode I just uploaded. Kimberly and I, with Alina, are planning to do a follow-up episode considering attention and information processing in context of social media and TikTok, Instagram videos with their split-second editing. Finally, it is my pleasure to be hosting within these episodes relative newcomers to the field of speech, language, and hearing who are making significant contributions to our understanding of language as languaging, our recognition of ableism, and clinical practice across the lifespan in the reality of cultural, linguistic, gender, and neurodiversity. I will see you next time with Kimberly. Take care. Thanks again.